Dusty, have you ever gone on a hunting trip?
Well, yeah.
You pack all your stuff. Let's say you're driving to New Hampshire. Let's say I'm driving to Ohio, and you're hunting for 4, 5, 6 days. What's the biggest challenge you usually have?
You're going to stop multiple times to get gas, and I worry about odor the whole way.
It's always in the back of your head. After talking to our friend Tim Gothier, we realized that there's a better solution that is portable. And that solution is called the ScentLock Enforcer. This nifty little device, about the size of an iPhone, it produces ozone. Ozone is this naturally occurring O3 molecule that actually naturally removes odors, kills bacteria, binds to all kinds of odor particles in the air, and basically makes you scent-free instead of like a scent cover-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
You can put this in your tote. It operates off of a USB and has an 8-hour battery life.
It's the personal ozone generator.
It is the personal ozone generator. If you want to check it out, go to ScentLockEnforcer.com. That's ScentLock Enforcer.com. Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by ScentLock Enforcer, episode number 181. Stephen Pfaff, Pennsylvania bow hunting, white oak stand setups, farm crops, and deer herds. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by the ScentLock Enforcer and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Craig Miller from Plato's Energy, and you're about to push play on my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry, Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, I'm Dustin Keismore from Keismore's Back to Nature Taxidermy in Ohio, and I am about to push play on my favorite podcast, and it should be yours too, the Big Buck Registry Big Buck Podcast.
Hi, this is Ken Jorgensen from Ruger. You're about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. My name is Jay, and as I say each and every week, thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry and listening to all the great information that we bring you about world-class deer hunters from across the country that like to share their knowledge about how they do it so you can do it too. And as always, tuning in and participating in this conversation as he always does, my good friend from Ohio and our co-host, Dusty Phillips. How are you, Dusty?
Oh, doing great, Jay. Doing great. Glad to be here. Hope everybody that's joining us is having a good new year. And I tell you what, start mine off with a new black English lab puppy. It's been interesting.
That's very cool. You going to do some shed hunting?
That's the whole intention of getting a lab puppy to train her, and going to go with the Jeremy Moore dog bone shed antler system and
nice.
Try it out, see what I come up with.
Nice. Yeah, it's that time of year where the deer seasons are kind of ending across the country. I think January is kind of the last month. Some and a bit into February, then everybody kind of transitions over to shed hunting for the most part. And if you want to go back and listen to our Jeremy Moore interview that we did with Dogbone, this is a great time of year to start that. So I've actually been listening to that and our 2 coyote hunting podcasts that we did with Al Morris at Fox Pro, and actually got the Fox Pro out the other day and went around in the nighttime and actually located some dogs. It was pretty neat. Yeah,
Fox Pro is a great utensil to have in your arsenal for critter hunting, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the shed dogs, it's been interesting. Obviously her being 10 weeks old right now, and January coming in, and February, March, and the shed season, she may get out in the woods some, but I don't think I'll push her real hard to get out in the woods with me. I'll definitely take her, but that 6 month to a year time is really I'm going to focus on getting the shed hunting embedded into her. Then I think by next year's shed season she'll be
ready.
She'll be ready to roll.
Very cool. Very, very cool. We do have several harnesses that have come in over the last couple weeks during the holiday season. I think we have about 6 or so harnesses. I think there are a few more on the way. So our supply has ramped up. We're fully stocked. So if you need a harness because you don't have one, a safety harness, we have some to give away. So if you'd like to reach out to either me, Jay at bigbuckregistry.com, or Dusty at bigbuckregistry.com, or Jim at bigbuckregistry.com, and just let us know if you need a harness. We're happy to send some out free of charge. We just want people to be safe out there, and it's part of our harness program that we kind of unintentionally started, but we basically had some harnesses left over in our basements and our garages from the harnesses that come with the stands these days. We all have our own harnesses that we bought separately, so all these other ones that are coming with the stands are just hanging out. So we figured we'd get them back out into the field to people that need them. So let us know. Let us know if you need some.
Yeah, it's a great thing that we can offer up, and maybe it'll save somebody's life out in the woods while they're enjoying their hunt. And safety first, as always. Yep. That's something that we need to focus on more than we do. And I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure every other hunter out there is guilty of it. But looking back, I wish I'd never climbed in a stand without some kind of safety device. And
right.
But nowadays it's kind of like just a ritual to put it on and go hunting. But if we can help somebody out by sending out a stand, man, that's awesome, Jay. And it's great to do that.
Yep. So lots of harnesses ready to go. If you need one, Jay or Dusty or Jim at bigbuckregistry.com. Just let us know.
Hey, you know something I got today, Jay?
What'd you get?
I got a advanced tree stand to hang on, an I2 in the mail today. So we're going to do a little review on that here in the near future.
Very cool. This was introduced to us through Taylor Hance and Crystal Mahoney. Of course, we saw that video, which prompted us to have them on our show, and we have been talking to Advanced Takedown Tree Stands since then, and we're going to see what they're all about. We're actually getting them into our own hands, so stay tuned for our full review on that product. We will be doing some videos on it, but it's always good to get that product in and give it a fair review on what it's really all about. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited to I haven't got mine yet, but I'm pretty excited to take a look at that stuff.
Yeah, I think that once we're able to get it out in the woods and hang it and be able just to have it in our hands and just talk about it a little bit, and maybe we can turn you on to your next hang-on stand from Advanced Takedown Tree Stands.
Right. Well, we'll see how it goes, but I think it has potential. Let's put it that way. Our guest this week is a fella out of Pennsylvania. His name's Stephen Pfaff, and Steve sent in one of his pictures of one of the bucks he shot over this past season. It's a bow kill and very impressive deer, and you could kind of get the sense that he knew what he was doing. And we get to learn a lot about how he goes about his business. He has a family farm that he's been hunting for years. The farm's been in the family for over 100 years, and there's been this long tradition of crop rotation, managing the farm, actually making money doing hay, kind of like what you do, Dusty, and also hunting the farm and managing the deer herd in the area in conjunction with other farms in the area. It's all public land. You can hunt it. It's not posted. So it's kind of interesting how they go about this like team effort, kind of like a QDMA thing, I think. And it's the communication's basically done by texting and seeing people down at the bar and talking by phone on occasion. No formal meetings, but they've been able to put together a pretty good management system. And they've learned a lot about where deer travel across all those farms down there in Pennsylvania. So before we turn to Stephen Pfaff, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, harvest numbers up significantly in Vermont deer hunts. This story was originally featured on the OutdoorNews.com website. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department says preliminary numbers show 16,160 deer were taken during Vermont's 2016 deer hunting seasons. Reports from the big game check stations indicate hunters had successful deer seasons in 2016, taking 3,447 deer in archery season, 1,438 deer in youth season, 7,725 deer in rifle season, and 3,500 deer in muzzleloading season. The 16,160 deer brought home by hunters yielded more than 3 million meals of local venison. The legal buck harvest of 9,968 was 19% more than the previous 3-year average of 8,372, and the highest buck harvest since 2002, said the deer project leader Nick Fortin. Harvest numbers increased during all 4 seasons, and the total harvest of 16,160 is the second highest since 2002. The increased harvest was primarily due to the exceptionally mild winter of 2016, which allowed more deer to survive. Additionally, the department issued nearly twice as many muzzleloader antlerless deer permits this year to provide some harvest opportunity and to limit population growth in some parts of the state. The 2016 report with final numbers will be on the Vermont Fish and Wildlife's website in early February. Staten Island deer vasectomies continuing through March. This story was featured on the SILive.com website and was written by Anna Sanders. The buck snipping won't stop anytime soon on Staten Island. The city is expected to perform vasectomies on burrow deer until the end of March. So far, 540 bucks have gotten vasectomies through the city's plan to cut down Staten Island's white-tailed deer herd. That's already more than the 527 male and female deer the city counted during the most recent aerial survey of the herd last year. The city said the plan was always for Parks Department contractor White Buffalo to continue into early spring and handle as high a percentage of the male population as possible. Anthony DiNicola and his team at the wildlife conservation nonprofit will work every day this winter unless it's too windy or wet. Those conditions are expected to impact field activities more than simply cold or snowy weather. Like other breeding periods, the white-tailed deer mating season is driven by day length. Testosterone in male deer is what powers rutting behavior, and that typically begins to increase in late October before waning by mid-January. The city said the end of the rut won't have much of an effect on the vasectomy effort. The only impact is likely to be that burrow bucks move around Staten Island less, which actually makes it easier to see patterns and target any male deers without vasectomies. The city wanted to perform the surgery on as many bucks before the end of the rut, so fewer fawns were born this spring. White Buffalo is being paid $2 million this year for the work. The contract is for up to $3.3 million over a 3-year research study. After White Buffalo stops performing vasectomies at the end of March, they plan to start up again in August. The vasectomy plan is expected to eventually reduce the burrow herd 10 to 30%. For the plan to work, at least 90% of the male deer on Staten Island have to have vasectomies. Use natural biodiversity to fight Lyme disease. This story was originally featured in the Times-Tribune website and was reported by Tom Horton. Cases of Lyme disease have tripled in the last 25 years and is becoming the most common tick-borne malady. The Northeast is the epicenter. First, it was a white-tailed deer. Their numbers had exploded as Lyme disease had burgeoned, and they carried vast numbers of black-legged ticks, misidentified as deer ticks. But years of study couldn't reliably correlate deer numbers and Lyme disease. Indeed, only a tiny fraction of the ticks on the deer became infected with the bacterium that causes Lyme. Then it was the white-footed mouse. Widespread in the environment, they appear the perfect source. Chipmunks and shrews also contribute significantly. Also clear is that forests fragmented and otherwise disrupted by humans clearly favor those mammals that are better Lyme disease transmitters. Just as significant is how many other species are around that attract a lot of ticks but eat them or just don't infect them like the mice do. Possums, for example, turn out to be the veritable ecological traps for the black-legged tick, consuming thousands of them a week, passing on extremely few that might ever infect a human. The bottom line is that a diverse woodland community of animals contains many such traps for the ticks that otherwise might bite a mouse or chipmunk and become likely transmitters of Lyme. The ecological approach to human health, like the diplomatic approach to peace, can be annoyingly slow and dizzyingly complicated, but the link is becoming clear and making it maybe the best hope for a sustainable world. Late-season buck could take down 73-year-old firearm record in Louisiana. This story was originally featured on the OutdoorHub.com website. The last buck to top the record books in Louisiana was in 1943, but its reign at the top for a typical buck killed with a firearm might be over. Charlie Lusko's giant 11-pointer, which he shot on December 1st on Diamond Island, has not been officially scored yet, but initial scoring put the deer between 184 to 188 inches. Don Broadway and his 168 6/8 buck have been the holders of Louisiana's buck title for over 70 years. While the record is great, there's no doubt Charlie would love nothing more than to see his name at the top of that list. That's every hunter's dream. Of course, behind every great trophy buck is a great story to be told. If you believe it, Charlie had no intention of shooting this big bruiser that day. Instead, he was busy putting up 20 trail cameras and just hoping to find the big buck again. It had not been seen in 2 weeks. After Charlie got all his trail cameras hung up, he jumped in his nearest stand around 4 o'clock p.m. Maybe I'm the only one that finds this humor in this, but wouldn't you know it, the afternoon he goes out and hangs all those trail cameras is the same afternoon he gets a crack at that deer. After a late start, not having much hope for any action, Charlie watched the buck casually step out at 200 yards. Charlie was so surprised he had to glass the buck a few times to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Once Charlie made the shot, he decided to give the deer some time. He backed out and returned later with a group of friends, where they retrieved the buck after a short search. Oh God, it was like a big party in the woods, Lesko said. Everybody was high-fiving and slamming knuckles. Charlie is planning on getting a full body mount of the giant buck, so everyone who helped get this deer can enjoy it as well. Even though the rut has slowed down and the temperatures have dropped to well below zero, this story goes to show that you could still be spending time out on the stand. There's still some great hunting to be done in December. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Stephen Pfaff.
Steve Pfaff, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Dude, I'm psyched to have you. We have this Facebook page for a reason, and it's to attract the brightest and best deer hunters in America. And son of gun, now and then an incredible deer shows up on the page and sent in from hunters like you. And you sent in one heck of a great deer this year, and I'm gonna try to dissect how you went about that. See if we can add it to anybody that's listening to the show can kind of figure out how to do kind of what you did, even though we both know that there's an element of luck that's still involved no matter how good a hunter you are. So, Steve, tell me where you're from.
I'm from a small town called Greenville. It's in Pennsylvania. It's located in Mercer County. We're northwest Mercer County.
Okay.
So we're kind of border the Ohio line, but we're northwest Mercer County.
Okay. All right. And did you grow up there?
Yeah, I grew up here. We actually have a family farm here, and we own 405 acres. We farm. We have beef cattle and pigs and stuff like that. And we've had it for 100 years now, and it's a great family tradition we have here.
100 years? Oh, no kidding. So 100 years have gone by, and do you come from a long tradition of farmers, but do you come from a long tradition line of hunters as well in your family? Yeah, actually I do. I grew up, my grandpa, he was the first one who taught me how to hunt. He passed a few years ago, but my dad, ever since I was little, I remember going, hunting with him when I was 5, 6 years old, always watching them hunting and trying to learn from them. And they always were into rifle hunting, and I kind of branched out into archery, but they're the ones who taught me, how to hunt, what to look for, and, what different places on our property, were the best place for deer during different times of the year with crops and stuff. So, but yeah, they've all taught me throughout the years how to hunt, especially a lot of good close friends as well. Gotcha. Were you ever told any good deer stories growing up about how great uncle so-and-so shot the biggest buck on the farm that anybody's ever seen?
Oh yeah. There's a million stories out there over the years since we've owned the property about, family members getting the biggest buck and how it all went down, and what they used, and how fast it was running, or if it it was during archery season. But there's all kinds of stories that we could get into with our families hunting.
What's your favorite story that you remember from your family?
Actually, my favorite story was actually my dad and his good friend Walter Johnson. He actually passed away a few years ago from a brain tumor. We've always been good friends with them. Well, they were out hunting and a buck ran past, and it was a big buck. And my Uncle Wally, he shot the buck, and they went down to see the buck. And the neighbor, they were all standing there like, "Oh, where'd you hit it?" And it turned out he hit him low, right in his private area, and he died because of that shot. And to be honest, I've never heard anything like that happen. And it ended up being a big 8-point. He hit it low and somehow killed it. And that's probably my favorite story about the farm.
Oh, wow. No kidding. So
I mean, once in a million shot.
So tell me more about the farm. What's it like?
The farm, we have beef cattle, and we've always had beef cattle. We sell a lot of hay, a lot of corn, and we do non-GOP corn to feed to our cattle, and we actually feed cattle out throughout the year and sell them from our farm. I kind of branched out, and we got into some pigs, and I actually have sows now that I sell pigs, show piglets for 4-H members and etc. And we primarily grow hay like trefoil, alfalfa, clover on our hay fields, also timothy, and then we do a lot of corn and oats as well. And those are all strategies to hunting, where crop rotation is huge to get your best production of crops. And so that's a little bit about our farm. We actually just got our barn rebuilt. It's an old style barn. We put metal siding on it and stuff, and have a sign. And but it's a family farm that we've had in our family for years now. And that's a little bit about the farm and what we do. Mm-hmm. We try to stick to non-GOP corn, and finish cattle out and pigs, and that's pretty much what we do here.
Gotcha. So you have crop rotation. You have crops that you plant.
Yeah.
And do you use that strategy to aid you in some of the deer hunting that you do?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, crop rotation is huge, and in order to for your land, to get mass production and what you want off your land, you've got to be able to rotate your crops. So most times what we do here is we'll put, corn on, let's say, a 10-acre field for 2 years, and then we'll rotate that into oats and seed it with hay underneath the oats.
Okay. And
that you end up getting more nutrients that way because what the corn takes out, the hay and the oats put back in. And then, we put lime on our fields as well.
Okay.
To get that hay, an extra spurt to come up through, and it just adds more protein, more greens, and if you have good crop rotation, you just better crops in general.
Gotcha. So you do 2 years of corn, then you go to oats. How many years of oats?
Usually just a year.
1 year.
The next year, yeah.
Then grass or hay the year after that.
Yeah. It depends what type of hay, because there's all the time types of different branches of grass seed you can get into with. Alfalfa, timothy, trefoil, and clover. So that's just pretty much on preference and what one is wanting to do with their property.
Gotcha. And that is to keep the soil up and running. Is there a strategy as to where you're going to hunt based off of what you've planted as well?
Yeah, and actually, it all kinds of it runs all into together. If I'm going to hunt, a later season. You usually want to go to corn because once the snow starts falling or it gets colder, the grass doesn't grow as much. So, I kind of move over to where the corn's at. Or, if it's early season, the grass is still growing good. Deer love clover, red clover especially, and even trefoil. And I'll hunt those stands early season. So it does kind of all come into play with, when you farm, what you plant and where you're going to hunt during different times of the year.
Gotcha. All right. So you're checking out the different phases of the season. You're looking at early season, mid-season, late season, and you're basing a lot of your hunting strategies around where certain crops would be located, specific to what what the deer want in their diet at that time of year.
Yeah, and especially with the weather, once you have a frost, your grass isn't going to grow as good.
Right.
So you can still hunt. You can still hunt that, and I also hunt crab apples too, because I planted some crab apple trees. But that, if you have a good crop of crab apples, that's good for early season. But once that frost comes on, that's over. But that depends on the year too. If it bloomed early in the spring and it frosts too early, well, those crab apples, they're not going to grow right for the fall. You won't have a good enough crop. So that depends too. And then also, your acorns too. If you got to watch where your trees are then to see, because bucks and doe, they all love acorns from oak trees.
Gotcha. All right, right on. Well, tell me about the landscape of the farm. And I think flat. I think mostly fields, scattered timber.
Mm-hmm.
What are we looking at here?
Well, we have, we have some. Probably only our biggest field's probably 30 acres at the most. We have a lot of fields. We have, probably 200 tillable acres on the farm that we can actually plant, hay and corn and oats, etc. And then the rest is wood. So a lot of it's flat, and then we do have a swampy areas as well that, that's where our pasture is for cattle. But on different sides of the property, we also have a lot of ravines as well where there's grapevines, where deer would like to bed, or Marflower rose. And that provides good cover, and that's in goldenrod. That's where, they primarily like to bed on our property. So we do have, on the one side, towards the north, we have a hill, with ravines, grapevines, etc., where deer would primarily bed. And then on the flat parts are the fields where the feed's going to be out in the fields that we plant for, our livestock, cattle, as well as, deer and other nature as well.
Gotcha. All right. And is this what you do all year round when it comes to the crops? Is that what you're thinking about all the time, or do you have other things that pull your attention away?
Actually, when it comes to crops, when you're a farmer, you've got to be able to feed your animals. So we pretty much think about it all year round. Right now in the winter time, you can't really do too much, but as soon as it starts to thaw a little bit, you're thinking about where you're going to plant. Where you planted last year and what exactly you need to do this year in order to have the production you need for your animals as well as, wildlife. So, it's an all year job. When you live on a farm, it's all year. It's not a part-time job. It's an all year commitment that you have to be ready for.
Gotcha. All right. When do you start thinking about deer season?
To be honest, I love archery season. I'm an archery hunter. I think about it all year.
Okay. That's what I thought you would say. If you're a true hunter, most people say I think about it all year round. They don't ever stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Even as soon as you get a deer, you're thinking, I'm ready for next season. What do I need to do to make this even better for next year? So I'm constantly thinking about deer season and what I have to do, where I need to look, and where I need to, plan for next year. For our farm as well as for deer hunting.
Gotcha. All right. So the soil dictates the crops and what's going to go there, and then the crops dictate the hunt for the most part as to what season it's going to be and where are you going to place that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your strategy? Let me back up. Do you only hunt the farm, or do you have other pieces that you hunt too?
To be honest, I only hunt our farm here. It's not gated or anything like that. It's public land, and we have neighbors and all that. I only hunt here for when it comes to deer hunting. It's just a strategy because I can focus all my efforts here. I put out around 12 trail cameras a year.
Okay.
And and I have different locations on the farm. Because that's a lot of land to cover. Where we need to look at and see what they're doing, because usually where they bed doesn't change unless you go in and you take trees down, whatnot, and change the landscape of that land. But usually the strategy of where they're going to feed, if we're changing crops, usually their paths are going to change. So where their feed's at and everything, that's a big strategy, figuring out what the deer are doing throughout the year, because it does change from winter to fall to summer to spring. So it changes throughout all 4 seasons.
Gotcha. And do you monitor the deer movement all year round with game cameras, or I assume if the snow flies, you use some of that technique as well. But of course, that's not going to give you all year round coverage. So you're using 12 cameras to kind of monitor where deer are moving based off of the crop rotation for the year.
Yeah, and and not only that, it shows you different. Like if you're not getting a lot of pictures, that means they're moving where they're walking. And maybe the feed that was there is not there anymore. So you can kind of learn from deer movements from that. So the cameras do tell a lot. The more you can get out there and see what your herd's doing, the better off you're going to be to understand what they're doing different times of the year. So yeah, when it comes to the cameras, like the only time I really don't, I take my cameras down and then I'll put them back up is then in Pennsylvania, they have a 2-week rifle season. And I take those down because we are on public land. I don't want them to get stolen if somebody was going to walk through it and take them. But yeah, I run those all year round, move them to different spots to see exactly what they're doing through different times of the year.
Okay. So this land is public land, but it's your farm. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's private land. We're not posted or anything, or you have fence up. But this land is public. It's private. It is kind of private because we own it. But like the neighbors, the neighbors kind of do the kind of same stuff that we do. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a community-based effort, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So it's kind of known, and technically it's not posted, but it is privately. It's not like it's owned by the state, for example. It's privately owned. You don't post the land, and everybody's kind of working in conjunction with each other around that area, like a game management strategy, it sounds like.
Yeah. Exactly, and in order to to get deer you want to have, you kind of have to have that commitment from everybody.
Gotcha. How many neighbors are we talking about? Are they neighboring farmers, and how much land are we talking about when you think about all the people that are involved?
I mean, we got neighboring farms. That's pretty much all it is out here is neighboring farms. There's quite a bit of land out here, but I mean, there's a lot of land. A deer move, substantially throughout the year. They can sometimes, I'll have a picture of a buck, and a guy that hunts 7 miles away one time had a picture of that same buck. Usually it's during the rut season, but I mean they do move substantially, and so I mean there are quite a few of us that talk and we kind of communicate, what they're doing, where they're going, and what we need to do to kind of, have food here to keep them in this area.
Interesting. How does the communication occur? Do you just see each other down at the coffee shop, or do you actually have meetings, or do you just go by phone calls? How do you set that up with that many people?
Actually, it's a small community, and everybody that hunts, we're kind of friends, so we'll like text each other and talk that way, and we'll see, if it's not going out to the bar or going out to a restaurant, just hanging out and talking to each other. That's kind of how we communicate and talk once in a while.
Gotcha. How many total people are involved?
It's kind of hard to say, it kind of depends because, I mean, there are houses, that people do hunt and they might own 12 acres, but, the farmers that, are in between us and them, they kind of do the same thing that we do, try to manage, the doe herd. That's huge, trying to manage so that way, you don't have too many doe, but then you don't have, too few a doe that you're not, producing the amount of deer that you need to have on this area. So I honestly don't know the exact number. I'd say probably at least, 20 people at least, that I talk to, and we'll text each other and talk about, what we're seeing and what's going on.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like if you didn't have this kind of community support, that you're probably not going to be producing the deer to the size of which you took this year. Sounds like that might be not, unless it's privately managed kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you can. I honestly think because deer do travel. Like for instance, I work for Penn State. I'm a 4-H agent there, and I've done some studies. I've read some studies on what they've come up with deer herds, and button bucks do move. Usually button bucks tend to be end up being your biggest deer. And this might not be true or not, but from what I've learned, when you want to harvest a doe, it can, I can see both ends. You want to harvest a doe that has button bucks because usually that doe is going to kick out those button bucks because those button bucks will eventually try to breed mom, and that doe doesn't want that, so she'll kick them out. And Penn State's, they've done studies that I've read that those deer, they'll go up to 20 miles away. So the genetics, that are here or, another state, they will travel over a period of time and go to different areas.
Gotcha. And these are the button bucks you're talking about.
Yeah, these are your young fawns that were born, in the spring before the hunting season. Those are the deer that will move, especially during the rut when the mom is trying to get bred by a doe because she's starting to cycle. And if those button bucks will move because the mom will kick them out, and they'll go until they find their next, good food source that's away from mom, and they're not going to get kicked out anymore.
Gotcha. All right. So the abandonment cycle of life, in essence, they try to get as far away as they can once the mom decides it's time.
Yeah, and with that, genetics, they will move. They'll move quite rapidly. If you don't, it's impossible to keep all button bucks in your area, but it will move. And for instance, in an area that could be, next year, it could be, 20, 40 miles away from where I'm at, the genetics that work here could be there now. Because they will move that way, if that makes sense. I'm a strong believer in that. And most, some people aren't, because they see opposite ends. If that doe is producing those button bucks, why would you shoot that doe? Because she's producing your bucks. But then again, I kind of see it that, that button buck's going to get kicked out, and that genetic's going to take off because, his, whoever his dad was, and now those genetics are moving away.
Gotcha. So your goal sounds like is to do some doe management. Yeah,
you have to have doe management. I mean, if you go out to a field and you see 20 doe, 15 doe, 30 doe, that's too many. That's too many deer in that area. I think because I'm a farmer too, and we got to have our crops here that we expect deer crop loss, but we've got to have enough food, to feed our animals here on the farm. But as well, we do expect that, but we can't be tremendous that, we don't have any crops coming back and feeding our animals.
Right.
So, in my opinion, if you have more food out there and you have a good managed deer herd, and that's hard to say for each area, depending on the food source and what you do have, with oaks, crab apples, your grasses and all of that, what's appropriate for each area. But, typically, if I go out and I see 20 doe, I think that's too many doe. If I go out and see, 5 to 10 doe, I think that's just about right. Or, even if it's just, around that 5 number, I think that's just about right where it needs to be. Because in my opinion, those bucks then, when it comes to the rut, they've got to work to find those does a little bit more. So they're going to be moving in your area a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. And when you're talking about trying to decide how to hunt and where to hunt, what goes into your strategy? You must have a game plan once maybe it goes back, maybe you need to learn about what's going on first, and then you decide where you're going to hunt. What goes into that? How do you decide?
Well, the first thing is you got to get out and you got to do your work. You got to set your trail cameras. Even if you just have 10 acres, you can, in my opinion, you can make that into a deer heaven. Even if you have 5 acres of bedding, 5 acres of food. But like my strategy is trail cameras. I see what the deer are doing, what path they're taking throughout the year, because it does change. I see what's out there, before the season as well as after the season. And then like my strategy, like I'm a big archery hunter. That's pretty much all I do. Like I will do some rifle if I have to, but my strategy is early season. I'm going to hunt more of my grass areas where it hasn't frosted yet, or crab apple trees where the apples are still blooming. If they had a good bloom, I'm going to hunt that first. And it's going to be kind of close to the path where I think they're going, because those bucks aren't going to be in rut yet. So they're going to me, early season, they're going to be looking for food, and they're going to be, going back to bedding. So that's pretty much where I hunt early season. Middle of the season, you start getting into the rut area. And depending on the year, where the frost lies, you might change it. I'll probably go to some oak trees where there's acorns, like white oak trees, and I'll hunt that a little bit more. And then when rut comes in, and that usually by this time in this area, you have a pretty good frost. Crab apples are gone. You're going to hunt. I usually hunt more of our oats, not our oats, our corn, our corn that's still standing or even taken down or freshly picked or combined. I'll hunt that as well as, the oak trees, because those acorns are still going to be there.
Gotcha. All right. And what type of hunting are you doing? It's archery hunting, it sounds like, but are you on the ground blind? You in a stand? How do you decide how to do that?
Actually, I'm an archery hunter. That's my passion. That's what I love. I just love being outdoors that time of the year. And putting all the work in, because with archery, you got to get that deer close. I won't take a shot over 30 yards. I have a bow that can do it, but in my opinion, I just won't do it because I don't want to wound a trophy animal if the buck over 30. If I because to me, after 30, you can just kind of make a minimal mistake, and that deer, you're just going to wound it, and you're not going to find it, and he might die somewhere. So for me, I'm an archery hunter, and when it comes to stands, I hunt in a stand. I don't hunt on the ground. I do hunt in a stand.
Okay.
And typically, when I hang my stands, I'm going to do it in beginning of August, if not late July. So that way, I get those stands hung. The deer get used to it. If I'm moving the stands, move them around different areas. And to me, if you hang them early, the deer get used to it. And therefore your scent's going to be gone by the time the season comes in. Cut your lanes, make sure you have your shooting lanes, left, right, front, behind, depending on, your situation, which, forest area you're hunting. But you've got to hang your stands early, and then, do your homework, put your trail cameras out, see what they're doing and what you have out there.
All right. How many stands are you hanging in August typically?
Well, this past year, I had about 16 stands hung. I had them kind of everywhere because I'm a big fan of. I don't want to hunt the same stand over and over. I think that you can kind of. I use scent cover up and all that, but I think you kind of need to move to different stands instead of hunting the same tree where that stand is each day.
Okay.
So I'm a big proponent of if you can get, even 2 stands and just, Monday hunt here, Tuesday here, and just keep switching back and forth. To me, you're going to see more and have a better chance of getting a deer.
Okay. And do you predetermine where these stands are going all the way back to August before you hunt them?
Sometimes, honestly, I do. Cause I have certain locations where I've done the homework and I know where these deer are going to bed. And be at. So some stands, I already know where they're going to go. And I've had luck there in the past, so I know where they're going to go. Now, when it comes to our crops, when we rotate our crops, I'll hang stands depending on where those crops are.
Okay. All right. So you'll have, how many are set? Like how many spots are like your known good spots? You've studied it year over year. That stand's going up no matter what. How many of those do you have?
Yeah. I'd say I probably on the property, there's probably 8 to 10 spots that, definitely at least 8 where I know that stand's going to be there. And I'm going to hang that stand right where it was the previous year, just due to bedding and stuff. But if it changed the dynamics changed, where they were bedding and stuff, then those stands wouldn't be there. But then the other stands are based on, crop rotation, where the food's at.
Gotcha. All right. So you've got some known fixed stands and that are pretty much guaranteed unless the landscape changes or, bedding area gets taken out because you're going in and just, I don't know, doing something there. Those are your fixed stands. And then you've got your variable stands, so to speak, that will alternate and change based off of the pattern of the crops and what you've learned about the deer movement for that particular area. And
also, in different parts of the property where you hunt, depending on, wind's huge too. Like if I want to hunt, this area and I want to have a tree stand in that stand, maybe, I want to hang a stand over here because the wind usually blows here northwest, maybe I want to change that because I do want to hunt that spot, but maybe if I hang the stand over here, that wind won't be blowing where they bed, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And when you're doing these stands, are you using ladder stands, hang-on stands? What do you prefer there?
I have quite a few. I have double man stands. Usually, I like to hang them. I like to be up at least 18 feet. I think the higher the better with your scent, and especially movement. So I do have some double man stands, but my favorite are I like the single platform stands with just the stick ladders going up. I feel like I can get up higher and there's less movement. They're not as comfortable as a double man stand, but in my opinion, those stands are the best. Now climbers, I'm not big on a climber. I know that's what a lot of people use, and I would use them, but you are tearing up the bark a little bit. I know you tear them up with platforms and stuff too, but I like to already have that stand set, and know where I'm going to go. So I use those Bigfoot platform stands, just single seater, just platform and the stick ladders going up. And most times I'm usually like 20 feet high.
Okay. All right. Have you ever had a situation where you did not expect deer moving. Let's say you're kind of deep into one of the seasons, and you did the deer ever change on you? Did you ever say, "Wait a minute, I didn't realize that this is what was happening," and you had to make a radical, in between season stand placement?
Yeah, I mean that has happened before, and especially with if you're hunting like a field that, what happens the most with me, if I'm hunting a field where it's new corn or new a seed of crop that deer would like to eat. I maybe went to an area where I saw a good deer sign, but those deer aren't coming from that particular area. They may be walking through there at night, but when I see them, they're coming up to the far corner. And by the time I could even get a shot, maybe it's dark. It's too dark to even take a shot at those deer. So I have had that where you have done your homework and you're seeing deer, but they do change. If it's because of the weather, if it's because weather's huge, because weather changes from year to year, and maybe they just change it a little bit, their pattern. So maybe you will need to make a quick move. And I have done that, but usually when I make a quick move with a stand, I usually move it on a Sunday because in PA you can't hunt Sunday.
Gotcha.
And then I usually let that stand sit for at least 4 to 5 days before I'll actually get in it, just to let that kind of calm down. Even if I haven't spooked something, that scent's still going to be there.
Gotcha. All right, that's fascinating. Now, how much do you lean on the cameras for intel?
Huge. Cameras to me are huge because you don't see all the deer, but the deer you do see, what is out there and what's going on and what you want to hunt for. And a big thing, with the cameras too, is after the seasons are over, because deer will travel and they will, get taken in other areas. You can see what you have after the season too, and if they're coming back, especially with bucks. Bucks are a lot easier to tell. So cameras are huge. And you can tell, exactly how many doe you're having. I had a picture, with, like there was like 10 doe in the one picture in the one area. And I'm like, well, how do I have that many doe in the picture? To me, that's too many doe in that area. So maybe I need to, maybe harvest a doe there. So I do rely heavily on those cameras. And then the big thing is just knowing what bucks you do have there, what management bucks you have. If it's a 7-point that's, 12 inches wide and he's messed up, or 8-point, whatnot, maybe you want to take that buck out to get him out of the gene pool. Or, for instance, you have a buck that you want to go after that, is a buck of a lifetime, or, and you can kind of age deer. It's almost impossible to do perfectly, because to me, you can only age them by the teeth perfectly. So, I mean, you can do it that way too. So the cameras are a huge part of how I hunt.
Gotcha. And how often are you checking game cameras and their cards and seeing what's moving around?
I usually check them weekly. I give them, 7 to 10 days before I'll go up and check them. That's usually what I do. Try to keep the scent down a little bit more. I know guys usually wait longer, but I usually try, wait at least 7 days before I go up and I pull that card.
Okay. And is it a rotating basis? Like you're constantly checking cards? Or you just have a day where you check everything?
It's kind of rotating. Some days, if I know I can sneak up there, and it's only been, maybe 6 days, but usually I try to wait 7. I'll go up there and check it. But usually, if I'm going to set, cameras in a certain area on a Sunday, I'll try to wait until that next Sunday.
Okay, so you're running 16 stands, you're running 12 cameras, and you're going to check 12 cameras once a week. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works.
Okay.
That's pretty much the typical how to check cameras. It depends on your card too. How many gigabytes you have and how many pictures it can hold, and what type of camera you're using.
Right. And what type of device are you using to check pictures? Are you using like a SD card reader into an Apple iPhone or some kind of a iPad or something like that? Or do you have something else that you're using?
Actually, yeah, I just take I have a computer just specifically for deer hunting.
Okay.
It was actually my college computer, and I turned it into just a deer hunting computer for pictures.
Gotcha.
And that's how I get all of my pictures.
Gotcha. So you're actually swapping out cards as you go, and you bring it back to your computer and load it up on your deer computer.
Yep, because
Gotcha.
I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste time in the woods. I want to get that card and get out of there. So I don't, the least amount of scent as possible is what my game plan is when I go to get cards.
All right. Speaking of scent, how emphatic are you about scent? I mean, it sounds like you play the wind. You'll design a hunt for that evening or morning, whatever, based off of whatever the wind direction is and where you think the deer are going to come from. But besides that, how much more do you get into deer scent or scent control for deer hunting?
Scent to me is big. Before the season, I always wash my clothes and it's scent killer and a scent killer detergent and all that. And then I put them in a tote. And the only time they come out of that tote's when I'm outside getting dressed.
Okay.
But when it comes to the wind's huge because if you're sitting in an area where the wind's blowing where they're bedding, there's a good chance if you're hunting a big buck, most deer actually, but if you're hunting a big buck, he's gonna know what you smell like. And most times, if it's definitely early season, he's gonna smell you and he's gonna wind you and circle you. But when it comes to other stuff, I do use, buck balm. I've used buck balm. I'm a big proponent of buck balm. I think that works well. And even if you don't want to use buck balm, just a scent cover, just to cover, a scent that you might be giving off if it's, your scent from getting out of your truck or walking in, just, or you're just, because you always have scent. I use deodorant as well. To see, and it's kind of once you use it and it works for you, you always kind of use it and get in the habit of it.
Okay, all right. How far from your stand, or let me back up. How do you get to your stand? Do you drive a certain way? Or you take 4-wheeler, a buggy rig? How do you go to and from your stand?
I walk slow, very slowly, and watch where I step, because noise is huge. Typically when it's when the leaves start falling, it's very hard to get your stand without making noise. I think noise is big. You don't want to make noise. So usually I walk to, everywhere I'm going. If I'm just, parking along the road or if I'm parking on the tractor path, that's, from the road, I walk from there. I think that's huge. Making as least amount of noise as possible is the best proponent of getting to your stand. So just kind of watch where you walk. That's what I do.
Okay. And how far from your vehicle or travel route, like where you're parking your vehicles, do you have a minimum distance, like you feel like you got to stay away before you start your walk?
Yeah. Usually, when I park my vehicle, usually what I do is, I might walk, if I'm walking a field edge, I'll walk that field edge until I'm getting ready to go in the woods. Mm-hmm. And then at that moment, or, if it's rut season, it depends on the year, maybe you want to, put a drag rope out with some scent. So that way you're kind of covering your tracks. So it depends on the year, but, I do stop and I do put scent, a different scent out that maybe, that deer might, be interested in, if it's not a doe and estrus or, your buck balm or whatnot, or even if it's just like a fox sure, and that you're just, covering up, your scent, because you're still giving off a little bit, and it might not make him spook, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah. And how far do you find yourself typically walking from vehicle to stand? Is it a long walk?
Usually about average. It's probably, I don't know, probably 350, 400 yards. That's about average.
About average. Okay. All right. That makes sense. What about camouflage and that kind of thing? I mean, we've talked about scent covering your smells. Do you care about what you're wearing in the stand once you get there?
Yeah. I mean, my inside layer, they're not going to see that, so I don't really worry about that. But for outside, I have I use Realtree. It's Scent Lock Realtree. It's at one pattern, and I think it does a fantastic job of kind of covering up, you in the stand, and you blend in real well with the tree. They have all kinds of different patterns, but I'm a big proponent of, the Scent Lock Realtree. That's what I use. I think it works the best.
Okay. When you're placing your stand, where you're placing it, and you're placing it based off of either it's one of those locked-in stands, meaning that there's A and B. There's the permanent stands, so to speak, or the ones that you know are going to be there, and then you got the variables. After you've decided where it's going to go, how do you strategize on where it's going to be placed in that area?
When it comes, you mean to the stand?
Yeah, like how do you decide which tree it's going to go into? How do you decide, what angle it's going to be at?
Yeah, usually what I do is if I'm looking at an area where I want to hang a stand, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a trail camera up and see, if I'm getting pictures of those deer. Because sometimes if you put a trail camera up, those deer might be walking behind that trail camera. You might not be getting pictures of them. So usually I'll put a trail camera up first, see which direction they're coming from. And it also depends on the wind, too, on which way I'm going to hang that stand. If you're going in the woods, you kind of want to go where they're bedding, where you think they're walking from, what you're looking at with your cameras. If you just see, tracks or scat or whatnot, that's kind of what I look at. But then another thing too is, if you're hunting a field too, usually when it comes to fields, I like to be kind of angled straight away from the field, so that way I can shoot that field, but I'm not facing that field, because I feel like if you're looking right at a field and you're facing a field, those deer are going to see you a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I kind of try to angle a little bit away, so that way, I can, have some cover behind that tree. Then with the trees, it depends on the type of stand you're using. Usually, if you're using a double man stand, you're going to need a bigger tree to hang that stand on. I'm a bigger fan of the little platforms, so I might hang on a little maple. I've hung on some white oak trees. I think that white oak trees are huge because they like the acorns that they produce. So I'm a big proponent of trying to hang on an oak tree. I think that's probably the best.
An oak tree. All right. So your preference is an oak tree, and then you try not to.
Yeah.
Be so obvious facing out into the field. You want to get some angle back so that you can shoot it, but you don't get spotted.
Yeah, exactly. You want to have good cover.
Gotcha. And it sounds like if you have this intuition that I think this is where the deer are coming through, I've got some sign there. Then you slap a camera up to confirm before you actually place. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, if you can see a rundown trail or anything, you can get a cheap camera, if you can, hang it up and just see what is happening there. You should get some pictures if it's a half decent trail.
Okay. And after you hang the stand, do you leave the camera there, or do you take it with you and place it somewhere else?
It depends on the year. Usually I'll leave the camera there. Now, when it comes to a main trail, honestly, I won't hang right on it. I'm going to hang probably 25 yards away, because usually if you have a mature buck in that area, he's not going to walk that main trail because he's smart enough. He's in my opinion, he's going to be like, I'm going to walk a side trail. I'm not walking that because, something might know that animals are walking there. So usually I try to hang a little bit off those main trails and, see if there's a side trail somewhere.
All right. And how are you deciding if there is a side trail? What are you looking for?
Typically, usually when there's a side trail from a good main trail, you might have rubs from the previous year that you can kind of see indented in the trees. So that could be a side trail from a buck from the previous year. So maybe that is there. Or it could be, there's more cover over here. Because a mature buck usually, I know it does happen. Usually they're going to want more cover than what a doe will. So if there's more cover over in that area, maybe that's where he is walking. And staying off the path.
Gotcha. All right. So doe will walk down the obvious trail, and then the buck will be on the side of it, probably in some thicker cover, and that's where you're going to try to set up.
Yeah, that's usually what I typically try to do.
Okay. Now, when you're in the thicker cover, obviously you have to deal with thicker cover when it comes to shooting an arrow. So how do you strategize on shooting lanes and things like that? Or do you leave it alone a lot so you can have the natural cover there? Or do you open it up some?
I do make shooting lanes, but I like to leave natural cover as much as possible. And a big thing with archery, to me, it's the way to hunt, but practice. You've got to practice year round and know what shots you can make. But when it comes to making my shooting lanes, typically I try to make one to the main path, one that I know I can shoot hopefully get that deer to stop there. And then, I try to go from there left in front and to the back from where that main trail is. So that way I can shoot, my front behind me to my left and to my right.
Okay, gotcha. And you said you like to practice a lot. And do you have a practice stand where you actually shoot from closer to your house or wherever you're stationed?
Yeah.
Do you practice a lot from the stand?
Yeah, and actually, I do have a stand. Typically, I honestly like this time of year, I don't have that stand up. So if I want to shoot, usually what I do actually is I'll get on my truck bed and maybe put a ladder on and shoot from that. That's usually what I do. But yeah, I do put a practice stand up and shoot down from that as well. I usually do that during the summer and the early spring, summer, and a little bit of fall months. So that way, because when you're in that stand, that arrow is going to take a different direction than it would when you're on the ground.
Gotcha.
So I think that's a big thing too, to know exactly how your bow's shooting, and
right.
That's huge.
Gotcha. And how many arrows are you shooting when you're practicing? I've heard multiple theories. I shoot a bunch and then I go get them all, or I shoot one at a time. I shoot two at a time. What's your theory on that?
I shoot 3. I think 3 is the number because it shows me a good pattern. Usually I get a triangle pattern, or, it'll be straight up and down if it's real close. But usually I shoot 3. Now, I do take breaks because you're not going to, your arm does get sore after a while. So I do take breaks, but I always shoot 3 at the most. And when I do shoot, every time I do shoot, I always end on a good note, not a bad note. Like, oh crap, I wish I would have done better. I always end on a good note, so that way you feel a little bit better about how you were shooting.
Gotcha. And how often do you shoot during the off season? How many times a week do you end up shooting?
I try to shoot, off season. I try to shoot at least 3 times a week, but sometimes that's rough. As long as I can get, at least 2 to even sometimes, I get busy with work, at least 1 time a week. That's my goal. But I usually try to get out and shoot at least 3 times a week, if not, 1, if that's all your schedule can afford.
Gotcha. All right. I think we've kind of painted the picture of your strategy and all the things that you think about going into your hunt and game management and the types of the terrain that you're actually hunting. And it sounds like, you're sticking to what you know. And you don't need to venture out. You've got plenty of cooperation, but there's also plenty of adventure on this piece of property, and there's lots of different aspects to it. So, but because you have such a working, intimate knowledge of what's there, where they go, and it changes year to year, but you can figure it out, that it almost helps you because you know better than an unknown spot where you're kind of guessing. Like, this is an educated guess, in other words.
Yeah, I mean, that does help because I do know the area. I hunt it every year, so I do know what they do. That does help a lot. To even if you're hunting the game lands, because go there and because I have gone to game lands, but typically I stay here, and just kind of figure out if you're hunting that area, just remember what you see that year and what they're doing. If they're too far away, exactly, which direction, and you can kind of base it from there. If you keep hunting that same area, where you're at, because it is beneficial because you can use previous years, just like, I do, of what the deer are going to do.
Gotcha. All right. Very cool. All right. Let's get into the hunt a little bit. I'm very curious to hear how this whole hunt unfolded with this fantastic buck that you sent in. And I'm curious to, when did that hunt start for you?
Well, for me, that the hunt for that buck started, I actually got a trail camera picture of him on August 14th. Don't ask me why I remember that day. I just do. And that the hunt for that buck to me began on that day. I saw that buck and I was like, that's a buck of a lifetime. I've got to figure out what he's doing and how I can get on him. So to me, it started before the season. And trying to figure out what I can do. Now, it's strange because, I hang cameras all year. I didn't have a picture of him last year. I honestly don't. I didn't have a picture of him. I don't know where he came from for sure, but I just knew he was, in this general area. And so that's when the hunt started for me. And it just continued, all year, kind of trying to figure out what he was doing, where he was going, where he was bedding, what he was eating. And then, It all happened.
How far did you determine that he was traveling overall?
You can't really. I don't know for sure. I was kind of making assumptions, but I want to say at most he was probably moving because he had good feed in this area. Once he got here, wherever he did come from, which I honestly don't know because I didn't have pictures of him. But I would say the furthest difference was probably 2 to 3 miles at the most.
Okay.
But he was in this general area.
Okay. All right. So you identified a core area of about 2 to 3 miles for this particular buck. All right. And so you got a picture of him on August 14th, and that's when you decided this was the buck that you hoped you'd have an encounter with.
Yeah, and I hoped. Usually a buck that big, they're nocturnal. They're not going to move too much, during shooting time. So, I told myself, there is a buck of a lifetime out there, and we're going to go after him. But I honestly, I figured I'd try to do the right things, but I didn't think that I would have gotten the opportunity to take this buck of a lifetime. Just how big and smart this deer was.
Gotcha. All right. So what did you strategize at that point? What was going through your head?
At that point, what I started doing was, put stands up, where I think he's going to be and where's my best opportunity to get him. And especially, my goal was, I honestly thought the best time to harvest this buck was going to be if he makes a small mistake during early season. And it would have been like, the first week. If he made a small mistake, during that first week, I was going to, try to set up to where I could get a shot maybe at him in the early morning or late night, because he's not, in my opinion, I didn't think he was going to move, later in the day when it was brighter out. And then from there, concentrating on the rut, and maybe, there's a hot doe around that he's going to smell, and it's going to force him to get up. But my main focus and goal was the early season. Okay.
All right. So you're trying to avoid any of the rut stuff kind of kicking in. You're going early.
Yeah, because I knew he was in that general area, and once the rut comes in, there could be a doe, maybe 5-6 miles away, and he might smell that, and he's going to go to where that doe is, because they will travel, 6 miles away, and then they'll eventually come back, just trying to find does.
Right.
So my goal was to get him in that early season.
Okay. And when you say mess up a little bit, what do you mean by that? What were you hoping he would do?
See, in there, I was hoping either, maybe, he made a mistake and he went out a little bit too early to get feed.
Okay.
Cause I was kind of hunting feed. I was kind of guessing where he was bedding. I had 2 areas where I thought he might be bedding down. Okay. And they were kind of in between where I was hunting where the food was. So I was kind of hunting where the food was, hoping that he would make a mistake and go to feed early, or go to his bedding late, or go to his feed real late.
Gotcha. All right. So how long did you get to monitor this buck before you started hunting him?
I only had a few pictures of him. I only had 3 pictures of him. Because he wasn't stopping and going. He was moving. He was moving and checking out the area, at least in my opinion. So I only had 3 pictures of him, so I was trying to monitor what he was doing. But he said, to me, a buck of this caliber, he's so smart that he kind of knows what's going on, and there might have been something over there, maybe taking a picture, even though I used that infrared. Yeah. Maybe he thought he saw that light or something.
Right.
So he was a tough deer to monitor.
Okay. All right. So, but you knew you had a guess that this was the area that he was probably bedding in, probably feeding in, and you didn't want to let the rut show up and have some doe take him off of the range.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. All right. So what day did you start hunting?
The first day here, I do believe it was a Saturday. It was November 5th. October 5th. Excuse me. It was October 5th. That was the first day.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a Saturday. It might have been the 6th. I'm pretty sure it was October 5th. And that was the first day for me. I hunted the best stand where I thought I was going to get an opportunity at that buck, possibly. Okay. Even though I only gave myself like a 10% chance, but there was still a chance. That's when it officially started the hunting season for me on this buck.
Okay. Why 10%?
Because to me, an old buck, because thought he was going to be really old. He's smart, and he's going to move during the night and get feed. But he might make, a mistake and move a little bit too early.
Okay. All right. So you were just basically weighing out your odds against the nature of big whitetail bucks. Gotcha.
Yes, exactly. Because they're smart. They don't get that big being dumb. When a mature buck gets big, they're a smart deer, and they're going to move, when they know that they're safe, and because they don't get that big for no reason.
Right.
And especially on land that's not fenced in, it's a free range deer. They know, and they're smart about it because they're free range.
Okay. All right. October 5th comes and goes. What were you thinking?
I wasn't too upset. I figured, I had a few more days of the early season, maybe I'd see him. I was hoping, you always have that hope because, he's out there, that you could get on him and maybe get a good shot at him. So I was hoping. I wasn't really down. I just love being out there, enjoying the season. I know that buck's out there. So, I wasn't too upset. I still had good hope.
Okay. All right. So tell me more about what happened throughout the course of the season.
Well, I saw some decent bucks throughout the season, and I did pass on them. They were just, young bucks that they need another year, probably 2.5. And, they were decent, but they need another year because usually, when you think about PA, if you typically shoot a deer that's over 130, 140, and that's a good PA buck.
Right.
Oh,
definitely.
Those are fantastic PA bucks, and these bucks are probably around 100, 110, and they just need another year to grow, and you just kind of hope that they make it, and I did pass on a 7-point that he did need to be harvested. He had some kind of messed up genetics from what I was looking at him, but he was. That buck was still on my mind, that one that I was going after. So, I was seeing some deer, but it just wasn't him.
Gotcha. All right. So days progress. What time of year are we getting into before you're starting to wonder what's going to happen?
Well, it all started, kind of the pre-rut action kind of took in, and, once the rut comes in, you're like, he might be moving, going in different areas. He might be gone. But that kind of goes through your head, and you think about that. So the pre-rut was in, I was, hoping still, but usually, they move when there's a hot doe around. I think, every hunter knows when there's a hot doe around, it's the best day in the woods because you see a lot of deer. So once the pre-rut came in, I was starting to get a little worried, but, you never know. Maybe I can get a hot doe around me that he might be around. So.
Gotcha. And what time of year is this occurring where you were at?
The pre-rut, it started probably, in the middle of October, pre-rut, towards probably the later end, probably around the 20th, the 22nd, somewhere in there, the pre-rut kind of started, in my opinion.
Gotcha. All right. And then what happened?
Well, then, we had a moon. I think moon phases are big. It was a bright moon, and it was a full moon, and it was real bright. And at least around here, I honestly thought, I was like, well, the rut's going to come in. I saw that moon, and I checked some cameras, and I actually had a picture of a buck breeding a doe, and I'm like, well, the rut's in, and when you go to your stand, you start seeing some deer and some smaller bucks chasing some doe. The rut's in, and the early rut, and that's what started to happen. And then October 28th, that was the day I'll never forget for the rest of my life. That to me the rut was kind of in. So I was doing some grunting and stuff. But October 28th was the day, and it was a Friday.
All right. Tell me about the night before. What was going through your head?
Well, I was at work actually the day before on Thursday, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take tomorrow off and hunt. I think the rut's in. I was pretty sure, the rut was right on the edge of coming in, if not already in. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take that Friday off, and I kind of was thinking about stands where to hunt, and I went where I thought he might be. If he was still in the area, and I thought, might as well give it a shot and try it. So then the night before, that's kind of what I was thinking about. Where exactly to hunt, where I think he's going to be, and especially what the wind was and what was going to be the perfect setup.
Gotcha. All right. So the morning comes. It's pre-light. What time are you getting out of bed?
It was getting bright here around, probably, I want to say 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I got out of bed probably around 5:15. Right. I usually get up, make myself a little breakfast. That's when I got up.
Okay. So you got up, you're getting ready. You've picked the stand you're going to go to. Did you do any prep work about wind direction, things like that? Did you check any of that stuff?
Yeah, and I did. I checked it the night before, and looked at which way the wind was going to be, what the weather was going to be like, and where from there. That's what made my decision of just checking the weather.
And what are you using to check weather? Are you using the app? Are you using the computer? How do you determine?
Yeah, I just use the weather app on my phone.
Okay.
I just look it up, and then I kind of watch it throughout the night.
Yeah.
Especially if it's going to rain or snow, and whatnot.
Gotcha. All right. So the morning comes. You have your breakfast. Then what happens? I
got dressed, and I got down to my stand. I usually try to get in at least 45 minutes early before it starts getting bright out shooting time. So I got down, got in my truck, drove to where the piece of property I was hunting here, and I parked along the road and got dressed. I don't like to get dressed in the house. I actually get dressed out in the outside, and I probably started walking to my stand, and I got in my stand around 6:15. Now, one thing I did do that day is I put a drag rope out, and I put some scent lure on it, just to kind of cover up my steps.
Okay, gotcha. And what was the weather like that morning?
It was chilly. It was probably, it wasn't too cold. There was a slight frost on, not a huge frost. I want to say it was, when I got out of my truck, it was probably like 36 degrees, 37 degrees.
Okay, but was it still windy, rainy?
Actually, it was very still in the morning.
Okay.
Very still.
Gotcha. All right, so you get your drag rope going. It's a beautiful morning. Nice and still, kind of the way they like it. You're out pre-light, 45 minutes, and you get to your stand. Any indication that something big was going to happen that day? Did you have that feeling, or was it just another day in the woods?
Well, see, actually walking into my stand, I kind of got down on myself because, I heard a couple deer blow. They make that noise when they get spooked, and they took off. So I knew that a couple deer were, because I was walking through a field. They were feeding in that field, and I was hunting in a woods line area, and I was bigger than a woods line. Like the woods is the thickness of probably 150, 200 yards area, and so I kind of got down on myself. I was like, oh crap, I just spooked some deer up, and that's, for any hunter, they know that's the worst feeling when you spook deer up. You don't know exactly what it was, and it might have been him. You didn't know, and that's So I was kind of sitting. I got in the stand. I'm like, well, crap, that kind of sucked. I spooked some deer on my way in, but who knows? You might as well sit here now.
Right. Gotcha. All right. Then what happens next?
What I started to do was the rut. I start when the pre-rut rut comes in. I start to do grunts. So I was doing some blind. I just figured I'd do some blind grunts to start it out to see what happens around 8 o'clock. Yeah, probably 7:30, 8 o'clock. I started doing some blind grunts, and I was bleating, 3 times. 2 real short ones on a little bit longer one, kind of like a breeding grunt, but not too long because it was right on the edge of a rut.
When you said
so, I was grunting
blind grunts, is that what you said?
Yeah, blind grunts.
Blind grunts. What do you mean by that?
I'm not seeing deer. I'm just, I usually just use a buck, like it's a buck grunt. I don't, because I have a grunt called the doe, fawn, and buck.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing deer, so the rut's kind of in. So I figured I'd start doing some blind grunts. There's no deer. I can't see any deer. They might be around. There might be a buck traveling around in my area. So maybe it's a mature buck. So I'm doing, typically 3 blind grunts to see if that buck is walking and I can't see him, he doesn't hear that and come over and check it out. So that's what I was doing.
So you're saying 3 blind grunts. What do you mean as far as the timing? Is it right away? Is it consecutive? Is it spaced out? What's the strategy there?
I usually, when when I grunt, I do my first grunt and I wait, like 2 to 3 seconds before the second one and the third one. So I don't want it to go on and on. I usually typically don't like to be long. So I usually wait between each grunt like 2 to 3 seconds. It's not very long.
Okay. And so you're getting out all 3 grunts inside of 10 seconds ish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And one reason why I did that, and I've always kind of done that because when the rut was in before in previous years, when I shot a decent 8-point, that's what he was doing. I kind of monitored what he was doing to what I kind of do now.
Okay. All right. And was from that series of 3, was there a time frame that you wanted to let pass before you did it again?
Yeah, like in between each 3, I'd wait 2 to 3 seconds, and then after I did those 3, I'd wait and do it every 30 minutes. So let's say I was doing it I start at 7:30. So I do my first set of 3 at 7:30, my next set of 3 at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So every 30 minutes.
And are you
typically
monitoring it on your watch, kind of, or phone, saying, "All right, it's been 30 minutes or so, and let's do it again"?
Yeah, I do. That's how I monitor it. Actually, I use my phone. I kind of, just check my phone once in a while, and okay, it's been 28, 29 minutes. Let's run again.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Gotcha. And so what time of day is this at this point? It's morning time. Where are we at in the morning?
When I first started the grunts, it was, around 7:30. That's when I started it, and, every 30 minutes. And then, 8:30 came around, I did it again. And to be honest, around 8:45, I said a prayer. I was like, Lord, let me have a safe hunt today. And if it's your will, let me see some deer. And if it's your will, let me get that buck. That's honestly what I did at 8:45. And then, at 9 o'clock, I did my set of blind grunts again. And then, at 9:04, it all happened. That's when everything happened.
All right, tell me about when everything happened. Let's slow that down. Let's slow down those last 4 minutes. So you do your last grunt at 9 o'clock, and between 9 and 9:05, what happens between those two moments?
Well, I did my last set of grunts at 9, and I was just kind of looking in front of me, and I look over to my right where there is bedding over that way where I thought he might have been. And there were actually some crabapple trees over there. And it was probably like 9:01, 9:02. It wasn't very long. Yep. And I look over and I
You're in the woods at this point?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in my stand.
You're okay. So you're not in a field, like you're in the woods. You're not.
Yeah. I'm in my stand, and I'm hunting, ready to go. So it was like 9:01, 9:02. I look over to my right towards, where there's bedding way over there. You can't see it, where he, might come from, and some crabapple trees. And I look over and I saw a buck, and I'm like, that's a good buck. I didn't know it was the buck at the time, but I knew it was a very, very good buck at that moment.
And what gave it away? Like, how did you know? You saw it was a good buck, but you couldn't identify that it was the buck that you had initially had pictures of. Well, what didn't give it away, so to speak?
Well, see, when I first saw him, I only saw his left side, and so I didn't, see his width, and so I only saw his left side. And he was in some pretty, there was crab apples there, but it was pretty thick, a lot of branches and stuff, and he was probably at that point, 45, 50 yards. He's probably 50 yards away at that point when I first saw him.
Okay. All right, and this isn't it.
So he was in some good cover.
Yeah, so they're in cover. It's funny how you can't identify them until you get the full 360 almost. Sometimes with that rack, you got to get a frontal to know that, hey, this is that buck. And from the side, sometimes they just kind of disappear. You can't quite tell. Yeah,
exactly. And especially if you're hunting thick area, when you see a good buck, you see a good buck, but it's tough to identify that it's the buck that you're going after.
Right. Gotcha. All right. So then what happened?
Well, he, I just saw his left side, and I didn't want to look at them. So I always try to look at deer like the corner of my eye, if it's a good deer and, a deer that I'd like to take. So I'm looking at the corner of my eye, and he starts, coming my way. So I'm still sitting in my stand, and I didn't want to get up because I didn't want to make sudden movements, even though, I was probably in that stand, I was probably like 18 feet up in the air. And he moved rather quickly, and then he stopped behind a bunch of brush. So all I saw was his back end. And at this point, he was probably 35 yards away. And so he ended up, I thought he was going to come in front. He ended up going behind me. So I really I didn't want to move because I didn't know if he was looking in my area when he was walking behind me. So I kind of could see his body outline through the corner of my eye walking behind me, and eventually stopped behind me. And at that moment, I knew he was kind of behind my tree, probably 30 yards away. And at that moment, I was like, well, I got to stand up. I don't think he can see me at this point because I know he's in some cover behind me, and I have a tree. So at that point, I stood up, and at that point, I turned to my left because I figured he was going to come to my left behind me. And I have a shooting lane to my left behind me, and I figured that was where he was going to go. So that's when I turned and get behind my tree. I'm all ready to go, and I didn't see him for probably 30 seconds. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life.
Right.
And so I didn't see him. Then finally, I heard him start walking again. And it was real quick because, it was in some good cover. And I knew this was a good buck. I still didn't know it was the buck, but I knew, it was it was a dandy buck. So he came in my shooting lane. He was probably, it was like 25, 28 yards away. And he stopped real quick. And, that's when I thought I had a real quick shooting, pocket that I made. And, that's when I shot. Okay. And I still didn't know it was the buck.
Right. Gotcha. All right. So you see, you draw back, you know that this buck's coming, you draw back, you're ready to roll. He steps out, he pauses, you let it fly somewhere between 25 and 28 yards. And
yeah. And the one thing about it too, when I did draw back, I had to hold for probably, it was probably 30 seconds I had to hold because I didn't have a good shot at behind his right shoulder. I didn't have a good shot at that point because it was he was behind some good brush, and I really had to hold until he got in that lane. So that's one thing too when you got a bow, to practice with it to see how long you can hold that shot. And then he finally took a step into that lane, and that's when I had a shot. I got a good shot at him.
Gotcha. All right. So you shoot. What happens?
At that point, he took off, and he was crashing, and at that point, I knew it was, a tremendous buck. But the character of the buck that that's him, on the picture and the one I've been hunting, I didn't see it because he wasn't, he never really gave me a good visible of his rack, because I was just focused. I knew it was a buck. I knew it was a buck I needed to take. And I just kind of focused on where the shot placement was going to be because I didn't want to wound it.
Yep.
But so after I shot, he took off, and he was in thick stuff, and I just saw him go, and that was it. I just saw him run through thick stuff. I just saw his tail going, and that was it. That's pretty much all I saw.
That's all you got.
And
okay.
My visibility is maybe 45 yards.
Gotcha.
Where he went.
Okay. All right. So you're pretty confident you hit the buck, and you have a direction. Yeah, that's all you got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew. See, I was honestly really worried because I knew it was a good shot, but it might have been a little low.
Okay.
I thought honestly it was a little low, so I was a little worried at that moment that maybe the shot was a little bit too low.
Okay. All right. And what'd you do next?
At that point, I tried to calm down. I'm shaking. Anytime I shoot a deer, doe, buck, doesn't matter, and especially if it's a buck, I'm shaking good. The first thing I did is I called a couple buddies, and I told them what just happened, and it was a good buck, and I told them about how it all went down, and then I sat there for 30 minutes, and then tried to calm myself down so I could climb down without falling. And then after I climbed down, after the 30 minutes, I walked the opposite direction of where he was, and I went back to my house.
Okay. All right.
That's what happened at that moment.
Interesting. All right. Now, why go back to the house? Why not start trailing?
That honestly, from my experience, I like to wait. Even if you think you have a good shot, deer are tough animals. And my first year of archery hunting, well, the first time I ever shot a deer with a bow, I was 13, and when I shot him, I only waited 30 minutes, and it was just a doe, and I ended up jumping that deer, and it was a good shot, but I didn't give enough time. I only gave it 30 minutes. So that's why I went back to the house, calm down, relax, get something to eat, and just try to calm down and give that deer time to, pass if it wasn't a perfect shot.
Okay. And how much time did you let pass before you decided it was time to go back?
I let 2 hours go. I gave that buck two solid hours before I even went down and checked, the arrow or anything. I gave it 2 hours.
2 hours. You've got no visual on any of the scene. You just walk away, calm down, collect yourself, and then
exactly.
Then put on your investigation cap.
I knew it. I knew I hit him because as soon as it was a decent shot because I saw some blood when I shot him.
Sure.
But even with that, you need I had to go home, calm down, give it about a couple hours before you even think about I thought about going after seeing where the arrow was, what the blood looked like. Gotcha. All right.
So you get back to the scene. What does it look like?
Well, actually, the first thing I did, I waited for a couple of my buddies to get down there because I like, to me, it's an amazing feeling when somebody gets a deer, and especially a buck with a bow. I mean, we all do it and we all cherish it. It's a great moment that everybody wants to share, with your best friend. So I waited until a couple of my buddies got there, and we got down to the scene where I shot him, and it was 28 yards, and there, where I shot him, there was some blood, and then the arrow was about 4 yards up from where I shot him. And as soon as I saw that arrow, I knew it was a dead buck. Because the arrow was covered in blood. It was a clean pass through, and it was good blood. It was very, very good. And when you see an arrow that's clean pass through and good blood, usually at that moment, you've got a deer. So I at that moment I was pretty ecstatic.
That's awesome. All right. So what'd you do next?
So at that moment, I'm like, I'm shaking. I'm like, let's go. Let's get on the track. So we got on the track because, we gave it 2 hours. And honestly, probably at that point, the arrow and stuff, it was probably more like, 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Sure.
So we got on the track and, where he went in the brush, you could just see, the blood, it was spraying good. And, the thing that was crazy about his track was the damage he was doing with trees with his horns. He was just gouging because it was thick brush and a little sapling. He was just gouging the saplings with his horns. So, you could just see all that. And so we were amazed by that, and the blood. And at this point, I knew it was a good buck. I still didn't know it was the buck. So we're tracking the blood. And then, it was really, really good blood. And we got probably, 50 yards away, and my visibility from the stand was probably 45. We got about 50 yards away, and I looked up on the other side of the knoll, and I saw a butt, a dead deer butt.
Yep.
And at that point, I'm like, there he is, we didn't see his rack yet because we were below. He was on top of a hill, but laying the other way, and we were down at the knoll, so we could just see his butt.
Gotcha. Yep.
So we walk up on the hill, and at that point, it was just I can't even describe it. The emotions. It was just an experience of a lifetime to realize, that you got the buck of a lifetime. It was just mass chaos pretty much at that point. And it was an unbelievable feeling that I'll never have again in my life, knowing that it was him.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it honestly was. It honestly was. And, just the raw emotion, and the best thing, I had, my best friends there to experience it with me,
right.
And family, and with them there, that's something I'll never ever forget. And it was just and it was an amazing moment. I mean, people probably, people wait a whole lifetime to shoot a buck of that caliber and not even see a buck like that out in the woods. And just to experience that, not even knowing it was actually him, it was just mass chaos and an amazing moment that I'll cherish the rest of my life.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, Steve. That's just amazing. What a great story, and what an amazing buck. And I know the emotions that you're describing is just, it's uncanny. Like, there's nothing like it, really. I mean, I'm not sure if even having your firstborn is the same feeling. I think it's similar, but I don't think it's the same. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's just a different feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something, I wish we were filming, at that point, that we had a camera on it, just so, I can relive it, but just to watch it again, that it was just unbelievable. That moment in my life, unbelievable.
What did it score when it was all said and done?
It scored 191 and 3/8.
191 and 3/8. And did you have it weighed by any chance?
We did a kind of a weight on it, and it was 240. But I mean, that's kind of, the scale was kind of, it wasn't perfect. So it was probably around 240 to the 230 range, somewhere in there.
Yeah, gotcha. Very, very good. All right, let's transition over to the 10 rapid fire questions. The story is just mind blowing, and it's such a great story, and I love hearing every bit about how you got to that point. Just amazing. All right, so I've got 10 rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, what's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Do your homework. You do your research to see what these the deer you're hunting are doing. You've got to really get on that.
Okay. All right. Love that tip. What's that one thing that you need to have with you in the woods, and it drives you crazy if you don't have it with you when you're in your stand? What's that one thing you got to have with you to feel like you're going to have a successful hunt other than your weapon?
To me, that's the knife my dad gave me. His grandpa, my grandpa used it, so his dad gave it to him, and then he gave it to me. So to me, I got to have that knife. That's my lucky knife.
Gotcha. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Oh, to me, my biggest pet peeve, because I'm a deer hunter. When it comes to everything, when you get a deer or anything, doe, buck, anything, that's a trophy, no matter what. Even if I can't stand when people go, I shot this deer, but it's only a 4-point. No, it's a trophy. So cherish every moment, everything that you happen to in your life, no matter, what small thing it is. Just cherish everything.
Gotcha. Very nice. How old are you today, Steve?
I'm 24.
24. What would you tell the 14-year-old Stephen Pfaff, knowing what you know today about life?
Oh gosh, be patient. Trust in God, and work hard for everything that you want to accomplish in life. That's what I'd tell myself at 14.
All right. Very good. All right. You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the country. You meet a stranger in a hotel lobby, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them? The first thing I tell them is, my profession. I work for Penn State, and I archery hunt. I'm an archery hunter. That's what I do. Gotcha. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Oh, I think I had a glazed donut. It was one of those ones from Sheets. We have Sheets in PA. I can't remember the name, but it was a glazed donut.
Glazed donut. All right, very good. You can have your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. What would you put on it?
Probably. That's a tough question. Probably a trusting God sign. I'm pretty religious, so probably something like that.
Sure. Absolutely. That's a good one. All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Probably Donald Trump, because he just won the election.
Kind of defeated all odds, I'd say.
Yeah, and and with everything with the news coverage, he wasn't going to win and everything. So to me, that's successful. And that's current right now.
When you beat and go against what everybody is telling you to be true, and you win, that's success right there. I agree with that.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
What's a day in your life look like? A typical day?
A typical day for me, I wake up, I go check some of the animals I have, like right now. I check my pigs because they're going to be farrowing, have piglets, and then get dressed, go to work, and then after work, come home, do chores, and then if I don't have time to hunt, I go spend it with I got a beautiful girlfriend. I usually spend time with her as much as possible.
Gotcha. Very cool. And finally, what's a deer hunting day in your life look like?
A deer hunting day for me is waking up early, getting breakfast, and getting ready to enjoy, nature, what God created. And, I wake up after I eat breakfast, get dressed, get in the stand, enjoy it, stay out until 10, depending on what time of the year it is, 11, if not all day. And then if not, you come back, eat lunch. If you're not staying out all day, and then go back out in the evening and hope you have a successful hunt and a safe hunt. And then that night, talking to all your buddies about, what you saw, what they saw, and how great it was to be hunting and not at work.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, that's the 10 rapid fire questions. You did quite well, I have to say. Steve, this has been fantastic, man. It's been a true honor and a pleasure to listen to you tell your deer story and give us all those little details that matter and all those things that you believed in on what was important to you to get to this buck and actually pinpoint it and actually take it. That's unbelievable, and you did it successfully, and I appreciate you telling the story to me, and I'm sure everybody that's listening to this appreciates it as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I've enjoyed talking to you, and if a buck like that, he deserves all the respect. He's the one who got that big, and I was the one who was just lucky enough to get him. And hopefully everybody can go out and get a buck of their dreams. And I've appreciated this opportunity. It's been an honor talking to you, and I've really appreciated this.
Thanks to Stephen Pfaff for joining us on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. Learned a lot. Guy's very smart and sharp hunter, and glad we could put that all together and deliver it back to you so you can listen to it and add that kind of stuff to your arsenal as well. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, we do, Jay, and it's
the Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Getting into a little bit about the shed hunting, and a lot of people think that they need to wait for a very long period of time. If you're already tagged out and you got some time, go shed hunting. Get out there right now and do some walking. And you may just stumble into that early dropper. And there's a lot of deer early this year, and they're dropping their antlers. But focus on a food source. If you got a crop field in your area, go check it out and get into the bedding areas a little bit this time of year. You're not going to mess a whole lot up unless you're here in Ohio. We got muzzleloader season today and tomorrow. But get out there and definitely be looking for some sheds right now and take your time and just go through slow, and you'll educate yourself more about what the deer movement is and where their bedding areas are, and really get in there and dig around and find them sheds.
Very, very cool. Well, thanks to Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. Dusty, it's been a great hour or so, a little bit more than an hour. It's time to go. Where can we find you when you're not hanging out in the studio with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Facebook, Chubby Tines Outdoors, or hit me up on Instagram, @ChasingAntler. Jay, where can we reach you when you're not on the mic?
Best place to touch base is jay@bigbuckregistry.com. You can always find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can listen to our show on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Blueberry. And all you have to do is, if you Google us, you'll find us everywhere. Well, Dusty, it's been another fantastic show. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. See you next week.
Can't wait.